Well, no, because they're not going to take a linebacker, but that's for other reasons. But what nobody ever says is, oh, and by the way, TJ Edwards played really, really well. And I don't mean like really well for an undrafted guy that wasn't supposed to play well. I mean really well.
It's Combine Monday here on Birds 365. Combine gets underway tomorrow. We'll be covering for you all week here on Birds 365. McMullen and McDonald hanging with you. I did want to ask you a Jonathan Gannon type question. Caught John Clark's Sunday night wrap-up on NBC Sports last night. And we may get John on the show one day this week because he's had a couple of really good podcasts, getting guys to jump on his podcast, one of which was Brian Dawkins this past week. So they use an excerpt from Dawk in the podcast that they did. Johnny Clark's taken off. And he said about Jonathan Gannon, he really liked the fact that over the course of the season, Jonathan Gannon changed the way he did his business, that he became more aggressive, that he became better at disguising some of the things that he wanted to do, and that was one of the reasons why the Eagles defense got better as the year went along. Why am I not remembering it that way? I think he was a little bit more aggressive against some of the lesser light quarterbacks that the Eagles played. I would, if there was any change in Jonathan Gannon's overall way of doing things and using players, I would say it was more determined by the opposition than the learning of the first half of the season as compared to the second half of the season. Did you think Jonathan Gannon made a conscious change? Oh, I'm not aggressive enough. I need to be more aggressive at any point during this season.
No, I don't.
Neither do I.
I do think that Nick Sirianni was starting to hear some of the chirping, and they had that conversation about, I think the word was challenging more. And I think, it's one of those things where, it's sort of like the chicken and egg. You said opposition. I won't even say it was opposition. It was success on first and second down. He didn't have it, and a lot of it is common sense because he didn't have it against the Bradys and all the great quarterbacks that we saw, the 80% guys. Anytime a good quarterback showed up, they didn't have any success. So if it's 3rd and 3, well, you're not going to blitz Tom Brady. Well, and if you do, you're good luck. Whereas when they got to the Garrett Gilberts of the world and the Jake Fromm's of the world, it's 3rd and 13. Yeah, go get him. Go get. What's he going to do? So a lot of it is common sense. But no, I don't think he said to himself. In fact, I know he didn't say it to himself because he has confidence in what he's trying to accomplish. Is okay, we gotta do this, which is out of character because we're not being successful. The goal was always to improve, to be successful, to force 3rd and longs, which is what everyone tries to do. And that's one thing I love about Jonathan Gannon. He tells the truth. He's like, everybody runs the same stuff on defense. Do you execute it? Do you teach it properly? And that's what it's more about. But people don't want to hear that, Jody. They don't want to hear the common sense aspect of it.
Agreed. And I saw very little change. You're right. It was based on results. You say based on results. I say based on the competition. Well, the competition gave you those results.
Yeah, exactly.
Those poor quarterbacks got into 3rd and 13, whereas Brady was always 3rd and 2. So, yeah, which comes first, chicken or the egg there. But I didn't see a great change. I was surprised because B. Doc knows more about NFL defenses than you, me combined. But I thought he just misread that situation. But, hey, here's the good news. Jonathan Gannon, major piece added this week. Eagles with a signing.
You got to look, but you got to look at it.
R-
Renell Wren. Yeah.
Renell Wren.
Yeah.
Is that
Why not?
WREN Wren?
Yeah.
Um,
WREN.
he was a fourth-round draft pick a couple of years ago by the Cincinnati Bengals. Played a little bit in his rookie season, missed all 2020 with an injury, was on the practice squad basically this past year. Uh, there's a reason why he could be signed at this time, right, John? That true free agents can't sign with anybody
No.
till the new year starts. But he was a guy who was just on the practice squad. He hadn't have signed a futures contract. The Eagles got a bunch of guys who would quote unquote be on their practice squad now who are signed to futures contracts. He did not sign with Cincinnati. This anything more than just a stone cold lottery ticket that you're throwing a
And you
line
take
into the water?
exactly big guy. You take a flyer. As you mentioned, he was once a fourth round pick, so decent prospect at one point before the injuries took over. I know he had a quad injury at some point. And, they need, if you think about their defensive tackle rotation, um, they like to go four deep, and they have Fletcher and Javon Hargrave, so no concerns with Milton Williams. But I don't think they're going to bring Hassan Ridgeway back. So you need somebody to sort of develop into that fourth guy. So then you start talking about Renell Wren and Marlon Tua.
Marlon. When are we getting to Marlon? Marlon was just a draft pick last year.
Yeah, and that's you throw all these guys in the hopper and you say, okay, who's the best? And I don't think that's a bad way to go about it. And again, fourth man in the defensive tackle rotation, if you stay healthy, you're talking about maybe 10, 15 reps, 20 if you beat somebody, if you're beating somebody really badly or soundly. Why not take a shot? A big guy, as I said, maybe he gets healthy. Fourth round pick is better than Marlon. Marlon T was a 6th-round pick, so throw him in the hopper, so to speak. Doesn't hurt. Let him show up to camp and compete.
Right. I'm not knocking the signing by any stretch of the imagination. It's a late February signing, which is right before free agency start. Well, not right, but a couple of weeks before free agency. There's a reason why the guy's available. The Bengals have had him. They've judged him. They've looked at him. They used a 4th-round pickup. We talk here on Birds 365 all the time about how the Eagles cling to their draft pick, how they give draft picks longer rope to continue to play and continue to prove that it wasn't a mistake pick and the like. And at times I think they overdo it, as a matter of fact, and are critical of the Eagles for this. Cincinnati's ready to cut this guy after 3 years, cut ties with him. If he's not even signed to a futures contract at this time, they've already stamped it as, oh, sorry, made a mistake. We're moving on from a 4th-round pick after only 3 years. That kind of says something. Now, the Bengals were the Bungles for a lot of years before they went to the Super Bowl this year. So I'm not saying, this is one of the marquee franchises in the NFL. When they say he can't play, you better believe he can't play. They have not always been that. But this year they are coming off a Super Bowl appearance, so they did get a whole bunch of things right. He's a name. That's what he is right now. He's a guy who's going to get reps in camp. Maybe you find the diamond in the rough. Maybe this is a genius move. Maybe, as I said, it's a lottery ticket. You spend your $2, you take your shot. Most times you go, all right, now after I lost my $2, I can't get my 3rd cup of coffee for the day. And you roll your eyes and you move on with the rest of your life. That's what this is. If this kid comes in and doesn't make the team, you end up going, who cares? You take the chance. Just don't. He's going to be in our defensive tackle rotation. I bet good money against that. You say he's going to be, what'd you say, 10 to 12 reps during a game?
Yeah. No, well, I said if he wins the job,
right,
he'll be a 10, if that, as the 4th man in the rotation. Now, what the concern is, obviously, is if you have an injury and then all of a sudden somebody like that's got to bump up. And but everybody has those depth problems in the NFL. I mean, just looking at, I don't know what happened with Renell in Cincinnati, but there was 2 stints on injury reserve, 1 stint on non-football injury. So a lot of injury issues. So maybe if he gets healthy, if he's healthy, maybe he can do something. But yeah, you're right. I mean, very unlikely he's going to be anything more than a camp body. But we'll see how it shakes out. At least he's got the template, the ability to play in this league, and he's huge. I think he's 6'5", 320. Um, so he offers something the Eagles haven't had as far as that massive big body. You think about, Milton Williams is undersized
Right.
for a defensive tackle. Son Ridgeway was not huge. This guy's a big, big, big player they haven't had in a long time. So maybe he fits something they're looking for. And again, you roll the dice.
Talking about depth on the defensive line, I got another depth question for you. Always enjoy doing Birds 365 on Mondays because two of my favorite writers, other than John McMullen, usually put stuff out over the weekend on a Sunday. Peter King with his Sunday morning column on Pro Football Florio spot, Pro Football Talk, and Rube on NBC Sports Philadelphia, Ruben Frank. Ruben, in one of his 10 observations, hit on TE2. That would be your backup tight end 2 on the Philadelphia Eagles roster, and suggests that the Eagles might want to use a draft pick on a player in that position in the upcoming draft. And that did surprise me a little bit. The Eagles had a lot of needs. Certainly, the ones are more important than the twos. People you believe can turn into starters rather than backups. And the Eagles have 2 decent backups. Jack Stoll's okay. If you're getting to your TE2, you're not expecting him to be playing the majority of your offensive snaps. And Tyree Jackson, a guy who we've spent a lot of time talking about here on Birds 365, because both you and the other guys that we would get on from Eagles camp during this past year's lead up to the regular season were impressed by this young man who they'd converted from quarterback at the University of Buffalo to tight end, that he seemed to be adapting pretty quickly there and was making eye-opening catches in camp. Sure enough, he gets hurt right before the regular season starts, and they have to put him on IR, and it was a decision when he was going to come back, and how did that tie into whether or when the Eagles were going to trade Zach Ertz. He did come back and play, but sure enough, he got injured again. Where is Tyree Jackson in the Eagles' plans right now? I didn't get a chance to see him like you guys did in practice, but you sold him to me pretty good that he was someone that could someday become a pretty big contributor for the Eagles. Where is he right now? Is Ruben Frank right that tight end 2 is a position the Eagles do have to look to upgrade in this upcoming draft?
Yeah, I do think they're going to draft a tight end. It might be early day 3. I don't think they would draft him in the first 2 days, but you never know. Mid-3rd round be certainly a potential, at least. You throw it in the mix. But with Tyree, I mean, the problem is he tore his ACL in the Week 18 game. I always got to think about that. Yeah, we're Week 18, Jody. So, I mean, his entire offseason is wiped out. Now, typically in today's modern world, you can get back in 9 months and be pretty much yourself from a torn ACL. They do a much better job these days. So he could be back essentially at the start of the regular season. But remember, this is a developmental guy. This is a guy who needs the offseason. This is not an entrenched player. So I don't think you can count on Tyree Jackson any longer. Now, you hope he comes back, and you hope he starts going on the same trajectory you thought he might be on last season. But, and Howie have said, I forget the quote he said about hope, but it's not a strategy, which he's right. The interesting thing about Jack Stoll, everybody disregards the guy because he's undrafted. This happens all the time. I talked about it last week when we were talking about linebackers. Now we have an entrenched player. And yes, I'm going to call TJ Edwards an entrenched player. Nobody thinks about him. Nobody talks about him. When we talk about linebackers, Kobe Dean, Devin Lloyd, Jerry Robinson for the first time in 40 whatever years. Can the Eagles go linebacker? Well, no, because they're not going to take a linebacker, but that's for other reasons. But what nobody ever says is, oh, and by the way, TJ Edwards played really, really well. And I don't mean like really well for an undrafted guy that wasn't supposed to play well. I mean really well. I think Pro Football Focus, and we talk about them all the time, had him top stinking 10 in the entire league about how he performed at linebacker.
In inside linebacker, they had him top 10 statistically?
Yes.
All right. I'm gonna need you to double check that for me. That would
I will double check it.
That would be a surprise for me. You know me. I was on the TJ Edwards bandwagon. Shoot, I came here on Birds 365 and said, you know, how he likes to do these, get him under contract before they hit free agency, complete utter free agency, restricted free agency, whatever. We know the Eagles are going to do some deals like that. They got my Lotta done big time. But I said TJ Edwards is a guy you should absolutely think about doing. If there's a 1-year team-friendly, get him locked up type deal they can do with TJ Edwards, I would do it tomorrow. And damn if Howie didn't get it done within the next 2 weeks. So
and I'm not. And by the way, Jody, I'm not saying Jack Stoll is TJ Edwards, but I'm just using it as an example. People dismiss undrafted guys. I thought Jack played well, and he's only going to get better. But I do think it's a need, and I did look it up while you were talking, and this includes the playoffs. He didn't play as well in the playoffs. So he was top 10 in the regular season. He was 10 exactly when you include the playoffs, number 10. And here's the top 10. I'll just give you the top 10 real quick. So it's not like there's not good players. Michael Parsons was number 1. Devondre Campbell was number 2. Alexander Johnson from Denver was number 3. Darius Leonard, we all know how good he is. Fred Warner was 5. Pete Werner from New Orleans was 6. Jamie Collins, 7. Demario Davis, who I personally love, was 8. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, who I also love as a young player, was 9. And then TJ Edwards.
That's pretty good company he's keeping.
Yeah.
That's damn good. I did not know he ranked and rated out that well. I would have thought somewhere in the 20s to be in the top 10th as it is, but that's still inside the top 10. You're right. Which means you're probably right. We'll be quoting Jerry Robinson's name again next year as the year that the Eagles have.
And we'll see. Can TJ keep it up? I don't know. Look, I mean, there is something to the fact that longevity is part of it. Guys can have good streaks and good seasons. Can they do it year after year after year? That's the consistency kind of. But he played really well last year. I mean, really well. And I just think people dismiss it because of his pedigree. And we talk about that all the time as well. I think it's a real thing, and people dismiss it.
I like Edwards. So even though I think the Eagles need an upgrade at linebacker, and I was Singleton made a lot of plays. He was starting, then Edwards replaced him, and he got back in because of injuries and the fact that Wilson stunk, bad signing, not even close.
Well, I still think they need an upgrade because I don't think Davion Taylor's the guy, ironically, as a 3rd-round pick because he has more of a pedigree. I don't think Alex Singleton is that guy. He's a great special teams player, and he does a yeoman job when he's forced to go in there. But I think you need improvement at the other linebacker position. I don't think you need improvement over TJ Edwards. I really don't.
I tend to agree, but I know even the Eagles, who get linebackers off the field whenever they get the chance, sometimes get down to just 1 linebacker on the field rather than 3. You still need minimum 2 linebackers on most downs. And right now, if you like TJ Edwards as much as you do, as much as I do, that's fine. That's 1. How about the other spot? So I still think the Eagles need a linebacker. They will be following the guidance, at least in part, or at least we think so, of Andy Weidel as the head of their scouting department, at least for now. Word on Andy Weidel over the weekend that he was one of those who has interviewed for the opening in Pittsburgh for their general manager position. The GM is going to retire after the draft. He committed to stay on with the Steelers until after the draft because he has been part of the process of ranking all the prospects and the like, and he's leaving of his own volition, and he's not looking to move on to another job. So it's one of those unique situations where he is going to stay in position till after the draft, but then either just before or right after, they will hire a new general manager, and Andy Weidel is one of about a dozen guys that they've interviewed so far. So it's not something that will probably happen in the next couple of days. As a matter of fact, with everyone heading out to the combine, there'll probably be a lot of backbiting and infighting for that position. As a matter of fact, and Andy Weidel is in the mix, but he's going to spend the next month with the Eagles prepping for the draft and giving them his insight and working with all the scouts and the like. I don't want to, since the Eagles have already lost two underlings in Harry Roseman's front office. Andy Weidel leaving surely would not be seen as a good thing. Can you be worried about it, though, Johnny Mac? This is kind of weird in that usually if someone wants to talk to someone, either they're going to get the job, not get the job. It's not going to be this longer waiting period, but that's exactly what we're looking at here. Is this something that the Eagles will be affected by leading up to the draft?
I don't think leading up to the draft, this is kind of that example that I give people that in the scouting world, it's different than everything else in the NFL. They're on a different calendar. Everything goes draft to draft. So Kevin Colbert's retiring, moving out of Pittsburgh. That's why his contract ends after the draft. That's how they do it in the scouting world. Now, when guys get promotions, that's a little bit different for GMs, assistant GMs, which you saw with Ian Cunningham and Brandon Brown. That's a little bit different because they're getting promotions. You can't stop them from leaving. But if it went, like an area scout, to use an example, Alan Wolking is one of the Eagles scouts. His contract, when it does run out, it will run out after the draft. Then he could start talking to other teams, and you'll see different draft movements. And that's when you'll see the update of personnel departments around the league come out. They'll start coming out all over around the league. But, it's a concern because the two guys who would have replaced Andy, if he got a promotion, if he got a GM job, are already gone. So, I mean, if this was traditional and Kevin Colbert got fired after the season, and Andy Weidel got the GM job, then probably Ian Cunningham or Brandon Brown would still be here with his job. So it is concerning that there's at least a possibility that the Eagles will lose their top three scouts. That's essentially Andy is the top scout in the organization, and then Ian and Brandon would have been number 2A and 2B. And that's a big hit in one off season. So I would say it is a concern, but you mentioned 12 people that we know of have interviewed for this job so far. And obviously Pittsburgh can take their time and do a very extensive search. They're also very in tune with the Rooney Rule. Obviously, it's created in their name. They were the ones who dove into the pool first with Mike Tomlin. They dove into the pool with Brian Flores. They hired him with all this. I ultimately think they're going to hire a minority candidate. But it's got to be a concern for the Eagles that they could lose their top three scouts in one off season.
You talked about the two guys that have already taken positions with other organizations, moving to the Giants and the Browns, the Bears, respectively. With Cunningham and Brown gone, I thought there was a chance that the Eagles would hire someone to replace them. If not advancing someone within their own scouting department to that position, then hiring someone to replace that scout. it does come down to the timing of the calendar. You've got all your information locked in. You've been putting your information together. You don't necessarily want to bring someone in, but you also don't want to miss out on the potential of hiring someone good. Does it bother you? Does it worry you? Are you surprised that the Eagles, to this point, at least officially, have not announced any replacements for the two front office guys that they've lost?
No, because just what I was saying, that's the way it always happens, especially with this team, and that look, somebody's already doing those jobs. And if I had to bet, it would be Anthony Patch is already essentially gotten the job in-house, is doing the work. And they'll announce the actual titles after the draft when the contracts run out and they reassemble the whole department. They will release it as one. That's generally how you do it. Every team in the NFL does it that way with their personnel department. So they've already made the decisions in-house. Likely they might be bringing in other people because they lost some people, and they might have their eyes on other scouts and other organizations, but they have to wait for their contracts to expire and them to be free agents, so to speak. So there's going to be some turnover, but that'll happen after the draft. As far as in the draft, remember, this team is deeper than any other team in the NFL, and that's not figurative, that's literal. They do that on purpose. Nobody even talks about Tom Donahoe when every time they have an upheaval, and that's happened many times over the years. They just go, okay, Tom, take over the draft. He's been doing it forever, and he can do it. They have Dave Caldwell, who's a former GM in Jacksonville. As I said, they have Anthony Patch, who'd be next in line for Ian Cunningham and Brandon Brown's jobs. They have plenty of people. I wouldn't be concerned about it.
I hear you, and they do. What was the comparison we made leading up to the Super Bowl? The Eagles staff as compared to the Bengals staff when it
20
comes
to
to
6.
20-6. So that tells you John's not making this stuff up. They do have an extensive staff when it comes to their front office and scouting and evaluation for the biggest time of the year, which is the draft itself. But you're used to that number. They've been using that number over the last couple of years. And you lost two pretty big voices in that. So we always hear about the collaborative process that is getting ready for a draft, putting a draft board together, having a fluid draft board leading up to it so that if and when you need to make changes, you can do so, and you can have reasons why you're doing so, and extensive opinions and scouting reports. Just taking two key guys out, you don't think it's going to have any effect, do you?
No, I don't, because they set up this thing, and I'm counting it up. They did update. I'm trying to count it up. So we're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Yeah, 18 deep on the scouting side. And as I said, it's Andy Weidel, Tom Donahoe, Anthony Patch, Alan Wolking, who I mentioned, Dave Caldwell, TJ McCrate, Max Gruder. If anything, I've always said about the Eagles, are there too many
Too
voices?
many cooks spoil the broth? Is that where you're going?
Yeah. Are there too many voices? Because we constantly hear ad nauseum, not just in Philadelphia, and you see it with all these GM hires across this league. Everybody, collaboration. Great. Somebody's got to make a decision.
Yep.
Ultimately, I think Howie's strong enough to make that decision, always has been. So I don't worry about it as much here as in certain other places with young GMs. But I don't know. That's a lot of people. And that's a lot of people weighing in. That's not even bringing up the coaching staff. They have their opinions. They get into it. What I'm not concerned about is there's not enough people to do the work. That I'm not concerned about. That I'm more concerned about, are they making the right decision, and what's that decision making process?
All right. One more Eagles related kind of overall strategy question. before we get our second break in, and Chris Franklin from NJ.com will join us next hour. This past week in the NFL, for some teams, 'tis the season to restructure, and a couple of big money, star level players and names redid their deals for their teams to give their teams salary cap relief. Yeah, it was two teams that are blatantly over the salary cap. The Saints redid Michael Thomas,
Yeah, they had to
checked
do
their
it,
offensive
yeah.
linemen. The Packers blatantly over, had to redo back the Aries deal. The Eagles don't have to do that. The Eagles are below the salary cap. But you'd also like a little bit more flexibility when free agency starts. Give yourself the best flexibility you can, but you know the price you pay whenever you redo these deals. You're just pushing money into the future. And at some time, that money is going to come due, and you're going to have to take a cap hit if you're going to continue to push it forward for the future. This week will be all about the combine. But then we'll have a couple of weeks after where we'll be leading, not shouldn't say a couple of weeks, couple of days, more like it, leading up to the actual start of the league year, new league year. Is there anybody on this team that you would look to see a restructure? First thing first, I shouldn't put the cart before the horse. We need to see what happens with Jason Kelce. You've said it on record. I've said it on record. We expect to hear something before the start of the league year. It would only be right for Kelce to tell the Eagles, yeah, listen, I'm back. I'm good. Let's get this deal knocked out. Let's find out what I'm going to play for. I don't think he's going to put the Eagles over an open flame and hold their feet to the fire. I think he'll do a team-friendly deal. He's done it before. He'll do it again. And we expect him to do that. But any other guys that you think Howie would attempt to do a restructured deal with before the first of the new league year?
Probably not before. It'll be one of those situations where if they need the space, they'll do it at that point. Remember, most modern NFL contracts, you don't even have to get the approval of the player now. You just move around the money. And it's sort of worked in because it's not hurting the player. In fact, it's helping the player. He's just getting more of the money owed to him up front. So they're usually happy with restructures. The problem with the Eagles is they restructured too many people because of the hell they were in with the Carson Wentz dead money. So they don't have a lot of guys that they can create a lot of money with. And there's a few. Darius Slay would be most notable. They could do Javon Hargrave again and get a little bit of money. Isaac Seumalo get a little bit of money. Jake Elliott, believe it or not, they could get, $2 million or so, somewhere in that range, but not tons of money. They've already done so many, and they've done Fletcher so many times. They can't do anything more with him, essentially. So it's not, they are where they are pretty much. And if they need a little bit of money, but I would certainly say Darius Slay would be the most likely to be restructured. And that's where they can gain, probably over 10 million. So that would be pretty significant.
And as you also correctly pointed out, don't need to do it today. I'm just asking now. I'm not saying, the Eagles going to announce something in the next couple of days. No, they wouldn't do it till after all the combine work is over. And there's a good chance they wouldn't even have to converse with the player. They can just make the decision to restructure, and the player always benefits by getting money up front. So my question was, would the Eagles do it? Not would the Eagles have to negotiate it. Would they do it to create more cap room? Probably not till after the free agency period starts, because you can come to an agreement with a guy, and if you don't have the flexibility, you just create the flexibility by redoing deals. He's John McMullen. I'm Jody McDonald. Birds 365 Mac guys. Chris Franklin, NJ.com, going to join us coming up next. Still got plenty of birds to break down for you. Be right back.